So today we'll be interviewing the public on the controversy surrounding the Cornwallis Statue and going over some of the history of the statue and Cornwallis himself. The Cornwallis Statue and other Cornwallis commemorations have been quite the controversial topic of interest in Halifax for some time now. There's been many protests about the Cornwallis Statue and what should be done with the statue. Many people are against the statue and want to take him down. Previously, protests have taken place in this square here, voicing concerns for what the statue represents. At one point, the city, in an attempt to find a middle ground, actually put a tarp over the statue. However, as you can see, it's been removed now. If you get closer to the statue, you can even see graffiti where protesters have vandalized the statue. Many people are upset by the idea that the Cornwallis statue is still here because of his actions. Cornwallis is most infamous for his scalping proclamation released upon arrival to Canada. If you're unfamiliar with the history of Cornwallis, that's okay. Here we will go into a brief account of the history, as well as the history of the statue here in Halifax. Cornwallis came from Britain in 1749. He was proclaimed the governor of Nova Scotia under the British Empire and was tasked with making a colonial outpost in response to the French settlement at Louisbourg. Cornwallis stayed over a 3-year period. At the time of his coming to Halifax, many nations were in the process of expansion and trying to create empires. Cornwallis rose through the British military, having come from an affluent family. Before coming to Halifax, he was involved in multiple conflicts, such as the Battle of Fontenoy in 1745 and the Battle of Culloden in 1746. As well, he was involved in the pacification of the Scottish Highlands. These were all considered to be quite bloody and brutal battles even for war. Cornwallis was reported to have came into a more instrumental role in the later Battle of Culloden. From letters sent to the British Board of Trade, written by Cornwallis himself, as well as reports from related officials that Cornwallis would have worked with, it's speculated that Cornwallis might have had mental issues at the time of his governance here in Nova Scotia, likely due to his experiences in war and battle. Despite establishing treaties and re-establishing treaties with the First Nations, violence eventually ensued, where Cornwallis did put out his notorious scalping proclamation. In the same time period, however, the French at Louisbourg released a scalping proclamation as well. So it could be said that it wasn't too uncommon for the time period, with nations trying to expand their roots and create an empire. Some people consider Cornwallis' prosecution and killing comparable to genocide. However, local authors such as John G. Reed have noted that this would be a 20th century term being used for something which in its own time was common among nations. So that was a general overview of the history of Cornwallis. Now we'll go into a bit of the history on the statue itself. The statue was erected in 1931 by Macy Rhind. Some authors have noted the statue represented an attempt at the time by the leaders of Halifax to reconnect with the British Empire and give Halifax a meaning and a connection with something greater than themselves. As well, the statue served commercial purposes, such as drawing crowds to the Canadian National Railroad station as well as the Westin Hotel, which you can see behind me. As there has been much debate over the statue and the image of Cornwallis, many local authors have brought up the subject of Cornwallis. Another local author, Lachlan McKinnon, noted that perceptions of history are something that changes with time. So perhaps the statue has taken on different meaning now than what it meant during the period of its erection. Does this mean we should remove it now? that the statue is viewed in a different historical light, or should it be viewed as a piece of history, which represents the thinking of the time and something that should be preserved? Perhaps these are the questions we should be asking. The meaning of the statue is definitely something that is up for debate. As to whether it should be seen as a product of the time period, a piece of history, or as some people would say, something that commemorates the actions of Cornwallis himself and celebrates these actions. John G. Reed proposed that the history shouldn't be erased, that if the statue is removed, it should be put into the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. Lachlan McKinnon, again, another local author, put forward the idea that the review and critiquing of history is something that is very important and not just erasing it or getting rid of the past. However, is that to say we should tear down the statue? Some authors, such as Martha Walls and Corey Slimkowski, have put forward the idea that just the presence of the statue is something which celebrates the image and the actions of Cornwallis. Next, we'll interview local Halifax residents to get an idea of the level of knowledge of the general public and what their opinions are on what should be done with the statue.
Okay, so are you from Halifax?
I'm not from Halifax originally, no, but I live here.
Okay, cool. And what do you know about Cornwallis?
Well, I've, learned that he's the, I guess you'd say, colonial founder of Halifax in the greater area.
Right.
But I also know that he had a bounty on scalping of the indigenous Mi'kmaq people here.
Yeah.
And I recently heard as well in Scotland he was evicting people from their homes there, as well as allegedly murdering people in their homes as well. And I forget don't know the details about that.
Okay. Okay. And what do you, based on what you know, what do you feel should be done about the statue here?
I have conflicted feelings because on one hand, I know there was suggestions about putting up a plaque that told the absolute history of Cornwallis, not just that he's this supposed great founder of this land. And I think that would be fantastic. But then I've also heard the argument that nonetheless a statue is honouring someone, so it's far better just to be removed entirely. So I think removed entirely, and maybe leaving the plinth with information about the statue that used to be here and why it isn't here anymore. This isn't imagined in the future. I think that would be fantastic. So I'd rather it wasn't here. I find it offensive.
All right, so you're obviously quite well-informed, but I'll give you a little bit more information.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
So he was born in London, and he came from a very wealthy aristocratic family, and he joined the military super early. So he entered the army at 17, and he was a captain at 21 and a major by 29. So he arrived in Nova Scotia in 1749, and he stayed for about 3 years after having to resign. And during his time, he was faced with a lot of opposition, as you mentioned, that he attempted to kind of remove the indigenous Mi'kmaq people from peninsular Nova Scotia, and he kind of put a price on their scalps, basically, or either to take them prisoner. But a lot of people also saw him as a brave leader because he kind of led his entourage of soldiers into this new world and kind of established whoever chose to move here into a better civilization. So the statue you see right here before you was erected on 1931, June 22nd.
That recently, I didn't know that.
It was on the 182nd anniversary of Cornwallis coming here to Halifax. So the statue has been regarded as a reflection of imperialism and a promotion of an imperialist agenda. On the other side, it's also established as a kind of beacon of the establishment of the very city we live in. So a lot of people do feel that even though his actions weren't the best, he's still part of our legacy and part of our history, and that he should be, I guess, remembered objectively as to what happened. So kind of based on what I tell you, do you find that's maybe changed your opinion on what should happen with the statue?
No, it hasn't changed my opinion, because I don't think that his name or he would be forgotten at all, be it if the statue were removed. I think if it wasn't for this controversy surrounding it, actually, I'm pretty sure I would have come up today and gone, no, I have no idea who this is. So if the statue were removed, I think there would still be a lot of discussion about him, good and bad, and I don't think he'd be forgotten. But just the statue's about honor.
Yeah.
And it honors the person, so it honors everything they did. And he's done many
bad
things that aren't honorable. So,
yeah.
That's
fair. Okay. Well, really appreciate that.
Oh, no, you're welcome.
You so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so are you from here?
Yeah, I'm from Halifax.
Cool. What do you know about Edward Cornwallis and his history?
Well, honestly, not too much. I mean, just basically that he's the founder of Halifax, essentially.
Okay. And from what you've heard around, what do you think should be done with the statue?
Well, I've definitely heard a lot of controversy. I mean, you know, some people say this, some people say that, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess you kind of have to keep the public happy, right? So I think maybe there should definitely be something done about it, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what that should be.
Okay, that's fair. Well, since I guess you might be a little uninformed with its history, I'll give you a little bit of background.
All right.
So kind of given what I've told you now, and based on what you feel about him, do you feel like that's changed your opinion of him?
Well, I mean, yes. He definitely, you know, those things were a little screwed up probably, but I mean, at the same time, you're right, he was kind of a pioneer of sorts. So I think maybe that the best course of action maybe to leave the statue, but to also, you know, maybe change the plaque or introduce something new in the square to kind of recognize exactly, you know, what his faults were, you know, what he did that was wrong, and you know, he did some good things obviously, but you know what he did that was maybe not so good.
Yeah, that's totally true. Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah,
I appreciate the interview. From Halifax?
No, actually from Ottawa.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you know about Edward Cornwallis?
Not much.
Not much?
Nothing
Okay.
really.
What have you heard about like the controversy surrounding the statue?
Concerning this statue?
Yeah, specifically with taking it down. Nothing? Okay, well that's fine. I can give you a little bit of background. So knowing that little blurb I've given you, I know it wasn't super
Yeah, no.
you know, detailed information, but what do you think now should be done with it? Do you feel like that's changed your opinion at all?
Yes. I see how both sides could have their grounds to stand on what they think.
Yeah.
But I do see it as imperialism now.
Yeah.
It's something that Canada today stands for. Sure that's what Canada was built on, but we're all being led by a liberal government and everyone's trying to do more for the Indigenous peoples. I feel if I were Indigenous and I walked past this and I knew the history, my blood would boil.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it should remain, if that's what's at question. I'm hearing all that.
Yeah.
I think if they were deciding what to do with the space, then why not have... coming from what I know in Ottawa, they took something similar down and they brought a local artist and they worked on creating like a bigger area for... And then the thing that stood in between was local art, and everybody loved it. So something like that, something maybe with an Indigenous artist, like something that really represents Canada today, not Canada in the 1800s.
Okay, that's fair.
That's what I think, and I think it would attract a bit more attention than just another statue.
Yeah,
right? You know, like we all know. And if people feel so strongly about it, then maybe perhaps they could meet in the middle and have you know, like a little thing on the side that says who this guy was. So that he's not completely out of the
So like both sides of
make it more representative today, more like a local artist, and that's
okay. Well,
my opinion on it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate the interview. Thanks. So, are you from around here?
Yeah, I'm from Halifax, Texas.
Okay, cool. What do you know about Edward Cornwallis?
I actually don't know much about him, other than that there's a statue and a bit of a controversy behind it.
So, based on, what have you heard about the controversies?
I hear that he did some pretty unjust things, I guess, throughout a while ago, and the statue's still standing.
Yeah.
People want to take it down.
Okay, well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of background information and then see what you think about it.
Sure.
So, with that kind of the little blurb of information I told you, has that maybe formed an opinion in you or given you something to think about with what should be done with the statue?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the debate regarding like keeping the history might be more just if it was placed in a museum where you can put that history into context, rather than having it out in the open, kind of glorifying the man who seemed to do a lot of unjust things. So yeah, that's my opinion now, I think.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Are you from Halifax?
Yes.
You are? Okay. And what do you know about it? Nothing at all? No. Have you heard about anything about the controversy surrounding the statue? You've heard about it? Okay. What have you heard specifically?
What I've heard that he was white British. Actually came to Nova Scotia and did some to the natives. That's what I've heard. Actually, I do know about Cornwallis.
Yeah.
And the protest is that we don't want somebody who came and destroyed the natives having a statue, having a parade.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a little bit of Cornwallis and let's see what you think about the statue. What do you personally feel should be done with the statue? Do you think it should stay
Should be removed.
completely?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it's objectionable to have somebody who came massacred the original population. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally fair. Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. Thanks. So, are you around from here?
From China.
From China? Okay. What do you know about Edward Cornwallis?
I don't know.
Not much.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know about the controversy surrounding the statue?
No.
No. Okay. Kind of based on that, do you feel like having the statue here is a good idea? Or no?
I think it's okay.
It's okay.
Yes. Because he make he give this city some things help this city.
Yeah.
Although he do some bad things.
Yeah.
But some people will keep thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts. Okay. So where are you guys both from? Are you guys from Halifax?
Yes.
We live here now, yes.
Okay. Cool. What have you guys heard about Cornwallis?
Quite a lot, really.
Yeah,
That-
enough
that-
to make up our minds.
Okay.
And we've also followed the controversy in the States with the statues down there from the Civil War. Not from the Civil War, but of the Civil War.
Yeah.
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 And so we know that he was the founder of Halifax and also he did some nasty things for the Mi'kmaq and
Yeah.
the scalps and so on.
Yeah, so like you guys pretty much have it like pretty accurately next to what it is. So based on what you guys already know and like the little bit of information I told you, what do you guys feel should be done with the statue? Do you feel like it should stay here or
You talk first.
changed around?
Well, I think it should be moved to
Mm-hmm.
Citadel Hill or some other appropriate place,
Mhm.
and then historical plaques put up to explain the history and what happened.
Yeah.
Not just the history from the English perspective, but
Yeah.
from everybody's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Public art should be unifying, not divisive.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving it here is divisive.
Yeah.
It's also ridiculous how long it's taking the city to make up its mind.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
And I at first thought that we should create a founder square and have him and a Mi'kmaq leader and other people involved with the early days of Halifax. And then when I realized how divisive it is and how it's really a red flag to so many people, I thought, well, let's take him down.
Yeah.
And then I thought, no, by just erasing him doesn't do us much good. And so I've kind of come around to the idea of moving him someplace else and putting up informational plaques
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
I don't think having him right here is the best thing. No.
Yeah. So like just kind of still preserve the history but not like glorify him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But
Explain the
we
history.
Yeah.
need to know the history.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and he's part. Yeah, in a museum area or a park with various statues and various plaques that
Yeah.
people can walk around and say, like, yeah, there was this guy and there was this guy and there was this woman and
Yeah, because I guess like it'd be important to know that like it's important to remember our legacy, whether it's like glorious or tragic.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah. But I do think there's been so much just upset
Mm-hmm.
that it needs to be dealt with instead of just a long committee to
Mm-hmm.
think about it.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for the interview. We really appreciate this.
Good luck.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
So,
Maybe-
So, many of the interviews taken today have just been concluded around the controversies around the Cornwallis statue and what should be done with it. Popular opinions range from it should be removed. No explicit details were generally given what should be done with the statue after removal, but a general consensus was coming up that the statue should be removed. Other opinions were that the statue should stay, as removing it could be erasing history, and that was seen as a negative, as we should remember history for its negatives and its positives. A very interesting idea that came up by two interviewees was the fact that maybe we should add more statues to the location as like a commemoration square, perhaps adding indigenous people, like local figures that were very popular, and putting up the statue about what they've done, or other people from the past during the imperialistic age that were perhaps more positive and had more impacts on Halifax. Other opinions were, as past local authors have said, that other people have picked up on, is perhaps move it to a museum with more context. So that way people can learn about the statue and not have their history erased, but they would have a more present context on what actually happened. Or some people just chose we should keep the statue where it is, as it's not as bad, but they wanted the plaque replaced, as again, to have more context on what the statue is about. These are all very interesting opinions, and it sparked the interest that perhaps we should have a larger interview process with more samples, or we should have more surveys gone out to the general populace, not just those who are politically active or invested in the controversy, but also those that are just the average person who maybe not know as much, but with some brief information on the background, perhaps could formulate an opinion to get a better understanding of what the general population wants to do with the statue. I hope this video sparked any of your interest to go into your local community and explore the controversies or past discussions that have gone around, and link them to the world and other similars and in-betweens on what has happened, and see where your community falls in with those and what actions you could take place. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and you found it informative. Thanks for watching.